going to be taking the position that abstract art is not art. Jacob is going to be taking the opposition. As always, winner will be based upon who concedes. No one concedes. The audience can vote on who they think won based on the debate performance. There will be no time limit. Thank you guys both for debating. You can get started.
All right. Thanks so much. Yeah, do you want to hit us off with it?
Yeah, I'll go first with the affirmative. First, I'd like to thank everybody here, and I'm going to attach a visual aid that you can look at and think about while I'm delivering my opening speech. This is Van Gogh's A Pair of Shoes, kind of famous piece. But I think most of this debate is going to revolve around definitions of art, and so I'll label my own position as the artwork position. So art is the work of an artist. The working of the artist is what makes them an artist. Thus, we must ask what the work of art is. What is the essence of art? Due to the aesthetic qualities of art, we cannot derive the essence of it a priori, nor can we point to a mere collection of shared properties and call that art. Thus, in order to understand what art is, we must understand what work is going on within and by the artist in artwork. We intuitively understand that artworks are objects, they have a thingly character. The painting hangs on the wall, we walk into the architecture of the building, we admire it, etc. However, looking at the simple objective or thingly characteristics, think extension, bare colors, qualia, things like that, that doesn't suffice. We rather need to look at the experiential qualities of artwork. However, we cannot divorce the thingly quality from the experience. You can't just imagine things and call that art, right? It's an existent thing. So, to quote Heidegger, the artwork is to be sure a thing that is made, but it says something other than what the mere thing itself is. The work makes public something other than itself. It manifests something other. It is an allegory. And the one element in a work that manifests another, this one element that joins with another, which is the thingly nature, is a feature of artwork. Let's take sculpture, for example. The granite or marble block of a sculpture before it's like sculpted is a mere entity. It evokes nothing. It is, of nothing. It's just a granite block. Or take a blank canvas or the famous black canvas by an abstract painter, which we probably will talk about, and we see the same thing. There is nothing such that such a thing speaks about. However, when we are actually interacting with such a block or the blank canvas, when we're viewing it in the quarry, for instance, we do not have the experience of the bare properties, right? There is more going on than a simple union of substance and property. When we actually dwell with objects in our daily lives, they are not simply theoretical objects of science. This is especially and particularly true of art. This We can't take this like propositional, you could call it, or scientific attitude because it fails to take into account the way in which things actually have the capacity to move us when we are being alongside them. What, however, is constant with things is the fact that they are, in a way, constant, right? They are formed matter. The matter stands together with form. So this is kind of like Aristotle. In this way, the matter of the stone block is the substratum, the substance of the artist's work. It is a necessary component, and we can talk about if digital objects, under my view, constitute art. They may not. They may. I'm not committed to either view. Nevertheless, the artist is doing a formative task. She is chiseling the block, molding the clay, and painting on the canvas. Notice, however, that with all other things, we impart the form onto something. We purposefully craft the tool, for instance, into a particular form. Typically, it is through the conjunction of the matter with the form that we find things to become useful. However, unlike tools, art does not have such a strict in order to property associated with it. Artworks are self-contained. While equipment may have equipment type natures, artworks, on the other hand, are not by their nature, right? Um, they are characterized by the work that's going on, both in them and by the artist. So now we can take a look at the Van Gogh painting, right? Here we see a pair of shoes, a pair of peasant shoes, in fact. Here we see that the shoes serve a particular purpose. In fact, there are many different types of shoes for very different purposes. The essence of the shoe is in a great part determined by what it's used for. Through the use of shoes, we uncover the essence of the equipment nature of them and an understanding of the nature of what shoes are by wearing them, right? Now take the painting itself. We are not given any clear view in this painting of what shoes actually are in a scientific sense or in any other sense. We're not given a definition here. The shoes actually sit on a blank background. There's no background to look at. There is no earth there. However, when we admire this painting, we what do we see? We see the toils of the pastoral life. We see the workers' work therein. We see the accumulated effort of how the wearer has worn them, the toils of carrying other tools, the joys of harvest, and the richness of the soil and the meaning of the earth. We also see evoke the daily worries that she has. Will her crops grow without pestilence? Will she be able to make enough food to feed her family? We can see all of this beautifully displayed in a simple pair of shoes. We see a door opened up to a world, and as we know, when we have a world, we have meaning. The world is not disclosed to the woman who wears them. She is just living in it and wearing shoes. She is living in that world she is experiencing. However, the artwork opens up to us this door into her world, maybe only for a brief moment. We have also quite we also have quite by surprise also learned what the nature of the equipment that we're viewing is. We've learned something essential about this object that it's representing through viewing the artwork. We understand how, judging by the nature of the shoes, that equipment wastes away. You see, they're very tattered. She needs a new pair. Notice how the artwork speaks. This is the essence of the artwork. We see a disclosure of world and equipment. We call this the truth of art, the unconcealment of what is concealed in our daily lives. Um, Now, abstract art, I'm not going to deny it can be beautiful. I'm not here denying that. They contain beauty for sure, but beauty by itself is not the working of art or the artwork. Beauty itself does not convey truth. It discloses nothing, but it is itself, it's just beauty, qua beauty. It's just there. A beautiful man or woman, for instance, does not, by the very apprehension of that beauty, disclose any sense of truth. Humans may be a tricky example, but when we encounter a beautiful plant or the beauty of watching the little ants scurrying towards their food and so forth, and we see no great direct disclosure of world from that alone. In abstract art, we see the same thing. This artwork does not convey world, it discloses nothing. It is not in its essential nature doing any actual work. Not to be confused, the person who makes abstract art has to do actual work, but the point here being is that it does not convey the type of truth or any sense of truth that the Van Gogh shoes, for example, um, uh, are showing. And so, therefore, that's why I don't believe that abstract art is art.
Well, that was beautiful. I have a number of things to say, I guess, sort of in response to what you've laid down. I'm kind of thinking about how to best sort of go about that. I think what I'd like to do first is show you just an example of how abstract art can disclose world. I think that would probably be sort of the best refutation of what you said. But I would note just quickly before we do that, it's not going to be the only refutation. So
Sure.
what you're saying is a view of art that's held by Heidegger, and he's reading Aristotle, and he's sort of, he's looking over Aristotle's shoulder. And this notion depends on quite a few terms and notions that are not unproblematic. So, first of all, the notion of essence. So, Aristotle distinguishes art from nature fundamentally. He'll say that something is natural when, by its own essence, it exists, and something is art when its essence is imposed on it from outside. So that, as you said, if I look at a block of marble, naturally the block of marble has a certain form, but when I turn it into a statue, I am in some way putting a form on it from outside. Um, so, this notion of essence and that we can know essences is not unproblematic. It's sort of a realist notion, and that we could critique it from nominalist lines. The fact that we actually cannot know essences, we can only know individual particular things. There is nothing that really lets us draw um, connections between these things and group them properly besides the form and conventions of our society and language, and maybe a sort of a stereotyping nature that we have in our minds. I wouldn't say there's such a thing as a form for an essence to really adhere to. So, we could go down that route, and I would sort of like to ask the question, like, this is a debate about abstract art, but and I'm fully willing to defend. We can go down, the most postmodern artwork, and we can go through it. I'm here to have a fun debate. But would you? But I don't think this is necessary to defend abstract art. We could say that, well, for example, all of music, except for maybe lyrical music, is abstract, right? There's no representational quality that music holds. I think we can all recognize that music is clearly art. If we listen to a Bach piece, we are moved. We have a world disclosed to us. We feel um, a certain commentary. We know, about harmonies. We know about disharmonies, and through these things, we, we have a sort of Baroque sensibility invoked in us when we listen to Bach, or we listen to Schoenberg, and this sort of dissonance rises within us, and this unresolved nature of desire sort of rears its head. And each of these artists conjures a world, and really through music, there's no need whatsoever for representation. I think another example, one that we can sort of analyze right now, I'll throw it into debate chat for anyone who wants to look. This right here is just an example of Islamic non-representational art, right? The whole notion is that to depict anything is in some way to engage in deceit, right? They hold a Platonic view, or a mimetic view of art, wherein there are the true forms of objects, and then at a lower level, there are the physical objects of the world that, the objects of our senses that um, are related to those forms. And then at a third remove, we have uh, the shadowy objects of a painting. So if I draw a picture of a real object, I'm even further removed from the forms. So in order to do that or avoid that, we should definitely not try to represent the world. We should just go for non-representational art, and we should definitely not try to represent God. That's absolutely something we should never try to do. And we should always include within our representational art or non-representational art a flaw. So each of these, to represent that, that no human is perfect, no one could create without a flaw. There's always a intentional flaw worked into the painting, or the mosaic, or the piece of art. Perhaps like a Persian rug always has a flaw worked into it. So we have here the whole worldview of the golden age of Islam, and we could spend a long time talking about the sacred geometry in this picture, the fact that their conception of the cosmos and how that worked, and astrology and the stars and how it's all linked together. But we don't. I mean, we probably don't have time to do that. I think similarly to the shoes, we could say that this unlocks a world for us. I think so. I think without even defending sort of modern art or postmodern art, we can have a defense about abstract art. So would you agree to that, CoolDog? Or are you gonna say that music is not art, or this is
Yeah,
not art that I posted?
I'm going to take up the Islamic art first. Um, I think so. On the first on the Islamic art, I want to I don't really necessarily disagree with you on the fact that it definitely holds some ideological components behind it. and that there is meaning like attached to this style of art or what you would call art. I just disagree on the fact that it's like self-contained, right? There's nothing in the art itself that evokes any of that. You can just look at that, and without context, you can come up with the exact opposite interpretation of that. There's nothing inherent within the art that will give you that. And so since it is sort of tied to spirituality, I think we might want to talk about like Greek art, for example. So if you think about like the Greek temple or the sculpture specifically, I'm thinking of like the sculpture of the god in the Greek temple, right? So they might disagree with you in that this particular sculpture, it's not necessarily like a portrait or like a reflection, like you're saying, or like a shadow of the form or farther removed from the form, but rather in the artwork there, the working of the art that's going on, it lets the god herself be present there, and thus it's actually the god itself sort of manifested. And we see that this is like a true type of artwork, right? Because it directly opens up the spiritual realm through that sort of melding of form and actual matter, right? And so that's what that sort of enlightenment of that is signifying. That's what it's bringing to truth, right? But
But
in this
that's not unique. When you say stuff about like the form and the matter, that's not unique to yours. My picture also displays form and matter to a certain extent, right?
right, but that's not but it's not like contained within its own specific nature, right? You're not attributing, you're not opening up anything by the nature of itself because you're not representing anything. It doesn't essentially evoke anything by itself.
Well, no, it does. It evokes sacred geometry,
So
or at least
would you
geometry.
like the simple test is, would you agree that seeing like a beautiful sunset, for example, is art in itself? Is itself art? Because we have
Um,
form and beauty there, and we have matter there.
no, because there was no intention of or there was no. I mean, it is no, it's sublime, but it's not art.
Okay,
It's not a
good.
work of art because
Okay,
it's completely natural.
right. But like you're in your the issue here is
No
that
one, no one did anything to make it happen. If like Kanye
right,
West was like, "Oh, I've got the greatest idea. Okay, the sun is going to come up tomorrow. Check it
right,
out." And like he did that, then that would be art.
right. But you see the problem with well, if you said yes to that, you would be in deep trouble, but you didn't, so you can go
No,
down
no,
there.
no. It's not.
Right, right, right,
No, no.
right.
I would like. I think there's a whole lot of problems with just going to Aristotle and saying this is the definition of this thing, or
Sure,
that there is even an essence to art. Like, I
sure.
think I would much prefer the notion of like a family resemblance, right? Where there are many things we call art. Maybe most of them share like a list of 7 traits. Some of
Mhm,
them only have 6 of those 7 traits. Some of them have
mhm.
maybe 5 of those traits. We could like talk about those, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think there even
So
necessarily has to be an essence of art.
I wanna
But
bracket that, and I will get back to that because I have
yeah,
specific things to say about that specifically,
sure.
about the
We can assume that there are such things as essences, and we can assume the sort of
um,
Aristotelian
I don't necessarily
or
want to do that. I don't necessarily want to do that, um, but I wanna come back to that point, but in this specific piece, right, the difference between this, right, and the Greek temple, right, is the world that it affords, and this is a worldless entity. It doesn't, like, erect or, open up a space for us to, like, explore meaning. It's just a geometrical pattern. Like, you could derive this from mathematics. You can write a function that will do this specifically, that will make this pattern, even with its error, right? You can do that. And so
I
that's
mean,
where
so could you do,
but it's
many types of
flat.
art with a computer, right? I think the point is not whether, we could theoretically train a computer to produce an
Sure.
image that looks
But
like this.
but you see
I
the but sort of the point of that is that there's nothing, like, inherent within the piece that is disclosing these various meanings that you are ascribing to it.
Okay, so let me back up a bit. Can I
Yeah, sure.
kind of like give a bit of an argument here? So I would say that, like, your image here is certainly not a complete representation of a pair of boots.
Sure.
And, part of this is sort of like the painterliness of it, the large brush strokes, the unevenness of it, these sort of impressionistic elements. Like I have a picture here
Yeah.
of some water lilies by Manet.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Great choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
So if you like kind of blend your eyes a little bit, these brushstrokes actually are probably more realistic of what seeing a water lily is like than had you actually just drawn like a
And
perfectly
that's
crisp water
exactly my
lily.
point. That's
Right.
exactly the point. See,
Yeah.
that artwork, because it's of something, is uncovering a truth. That's
Okay.
the work that the art is doing. This art, or art, you could say, in quotation marks, doesn't uncover any type of truth whatsoever. It's not expressing anything.
Well, it is expressing quite a lot, right? These these geometric patterns is what it expresses. It expresses the nature of God, expresses the fact that, what we can say about God. It explores a conceptual space. See,
But
just as you're like, see, we can sort of go down a road here. This is sort of what I
Mhm.
wanted to do. So we begin with these water lilies. And what are we really
Sure, okay.
experiencing? We're realizing that if you draw a realistic thing, it's not as real as if you draw sort of this impression of it that leaves in your mind. And so the subject of the painting, in a way, is shifting from trying to draw what is in the world to trying to draw what is in your mind. So we have, the example of, let's say, the a I like this painting. It's a de Stil, the style, right?
Yeah, this is not art under my definition.
Okay, you don't think this is art. So exactly like the above painting depicts a certain quality of our sense perception, this too depicts qualities of our sense perception. We see red, we see blue, we see yellow. These are not qualities that we can't see. They're arranged in ways that are non representative, but they speak to us nonetheless. They open up a space for interpretation. Um, so I would kind of like go through a number of things. So the question, like one of the things you said is like you kind of bemoaned, the lack of skill or something. You're like, there's no skill in
I
this.
haven't said that. I have not said that.
Well, you have sort of said like the techniques are not as
Said in
developed.
I specifically said, reading from my speech, that I'm not denying the fact that the artists actually do work to make them. So they're doing a type of labor, or they're doing something to make them. I haven't made a comment about skill yet.
Okay, okay. It I don't know. I wrote down. What did I write down? Anyway, I would just say that these artworks also open an interpretive space for the exploration of certain ideas. These speak to a certain minimalism, right? The concept of reducing something down to its basic elements and stripping out every single thing you can from a painting and seeing if it still works as a painting. Maybe you don't think this works as a painting, but I would argue that it does. I think, it is bold. It expresses these very concepts that you can break something down to its constituent elements. And you don't have to represent something. You can represent qualities of the mind taken to essentially an abstract level. The point being you've abstracted these qualities. So when we speak and when we talk, we're constantly using essences, as you say, right? That's something you want sort of need for your argument, right? So there is red, there is yellow. These things are qualities. They We sort of perceive them, and here they are represented for us on the page. So this actually would be representational of those qualities. Would you agree with that?
I don't agree that bare properties constitute any. I will only agree that bare properties can be apprehended in this piece.
Okay.
So
So
I agree that I'm seeing yellow, and I agree that I'm seeing red, but nothing beyond that.
okay,
It's like if you were to list off the properties of a blank piece of wood, of like a uncarved piece of wood, for example. It's the
okay,
exact same thing.
all right. So I would just say that baked into the phenomenal or the phenomenological approach to art is the assumption of some sort of, I mean, for Heidegger, it would be like Dasein,
Yeah,
singular Dasein. And so the notion that is being expressed in art, in these artworks, sort of shifts. So, and you could even say it's aligned with the philosophy of the age. So if you can think about it, that medieval art is sort of very strange before perspective. It's like people on a sort of flat surface. Things are not in, all sorts of sizes. They can't figure out like how many legs a table has. It's a like a very confused style of art. But it's sort of from the perspective of nowhere, or from God's perspective. This sort of like and early Renaissance painting is the same, like very, very, very early, like Botticelli's Springtime.
yeah, sure.
They're sort of all standing there, like forms, like radiating. There's sort of a lifelessness to it. Then in the Renaissance, you have like this depiction of, this discovery of perspective. You locate the subject within the painting, right? That all the lines of sight are coming towards now an observer, which has been included in the painting, and that is what's going to give the painting like shape and
Yeah.
sort of definition, right?
So like
And
on
with this subject, right, the subject rises in importance, but there are all sorts of things that now make us question this subject and move more to a intersubjective position. We realize the subject's constituted through language, that the subject is maybe different through time. We have like Hume's critique. Maybe there is no self. Maybe I'm just like disparate elements. Um, and so these ideas start to be included. So different perspectives. We have things like um, Picasso, right? You have
yeah,
different views through time, or different views from different perspectives simultaneously on the page, right? And what it does is you go from a sort of 3D picture where you have a single subject to, again, this sort of flat image.
which reflects early medieval works. Yeah, sure.
Or no, but it is a new, because it's no longer from God's perspective. It's from
Sure.
this intersubjective position. So I would say that, as we abstract, we have to ask ourselves like what even the artist's role is. Like I think we famously know Duchamp, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like we have the fountain,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So the whole idea is it's like a urinal, but it's called the
Under my
fountain.
definition, that's art. Under my
Yeah.
definition.
In your definition, it would be art.
Yeah, it would be art.
Okay. So but what this does is it opens up a space, right? The whole idea of this piece is not necessarily simply the piece, but our reaction to it, the space that it opens up. So what abstract art does is similarly, it opens up a space for our reaction to it. And often the reaction of, this isn't art, I could do this, is a primed reaction
Yeah.
and exists within the space of interpretation that these artworks create. So I would say that CoolDog, whether he likes it or not, is living in the world of abstract art, right now by his very argument, trying to argue against it. Are you not?
Sure. Um, so like in response to that, so like if you think about on your historical point, so if you think about like the Greek temple or like early medieval iconography, let me find an image. I don't know if people are familiar. Let me find it quick so people know what I'm talking about. But it's very flat like the Picasso. Yeah, here's an example. Famous painting. Um, God, PDF. So I think this is like a Byzantine, but I'm not entirely sure specific. But this is so when we look at these types of paintings or like the early stuff, like the Greek temple and these paintings, they because you're I agree with you that they're correct in the sense that they are evoking something within the world which they're created, right? So when we go into the Greek temple, right, the artwork that previously was supposed to like embody the presence of God, or even in this iconography piece, because we are so far away from there, the artwork ceases, like that door, that opening into that world becomes closed to a certain extent, right? And so we can get through to it in certain ways through rationalizations, but we aren't actually able to feel the full force of that artwork as it was back then. So I'm kind of agreeing with you on that point. But you see, the problem that you get about is that there's no question about that that's a urinal. There's no question that this is like freaky, uncanny valley baby Jesus and Mary, right? There's no question that that's a face, right? No question that that's water lilies. No question that that's a pair of shoes, right? But whatever interpretation you give to offer, right, for whatever this Islamic art is, and whatever interpretation you give to offer about these yellow, white, black, and red squares and blue squares, right?
Well,
I'm just going to
those
offer
are also saying
in
things.
rectangles, right? But I'm going to say the exact opposite of whatever you say. I'm going to say the exact opposite, and there's no structure here to actually do interpretive work because it's radically unstructured, right? And so this is a time where I can start talking about the music point, right? So this is a reason why the music, for example, can count as art even though it's non-representational. Also, it's a different class, right? So visual arts are going to be different. You can't actually represent anything purely. We're talking about visual arts. The
So
representational
how is
quality
it
is different,
that
right?
music can be?
Because
Because
it's structured by
I believe it's
harmony,
also
it's structured by harmony, it's structured by rhythm, and it
so
evokes
similarly. This
things.
painting is structured by color, the color wheel, the various like ways the color interacts with each other. It's color. It's divided into sections, right?
Yeah, sure. But
So it's saying
there's a march, right? A march is a type of music, right? And that evokes the military. It's representative of, with that rhythm, it's representative of order and structure and all of those things, as well as like how it's used and performed. Secondly, music is, and I'm tackling the music point, but I want to get back to your point because this I argue is unstructured.
no, but
Um,
I would just say that all of the things you're arguing about music can just very easily be applied to any one of these paintings, right? Like this, the Islamic one represents the Islamic faith as much as like the march would ever represent the military, right?
I mean, let me think about it because I kind of lost my train here. Kind of lost
Yeah,
my train here for a
yeah.
second.
I just feel like
Let's see. Okay.
any you can break it down, but I do believe these things should not be. I think there is a certain sort of like snootiness or like a contempt with which you're kind of holding these things, when there are just other views of art and other understandings of what they are that um, I would say are like more
Oh yeah.
charitable,
So
more
on
appropriate.
the music point, I just got it because you interrupted me with a different point.
Oh my bad.
So I got it back. Sorry, I had to rethink my brain. So the other thing about music is that it's an event and it's an active performance. And so that makes it an entirely different sort of animal. So like the Dada's performance art, right? That's an entirely that's categorically different than artwork that can be like directly preserved. Because I mean, I'm sure as you know, whenever you record something, you lose the original. When you're recording something in audio, for example, right, you're losing the original there, and it's never like actually being there. Like, for example, musicals, I can't watch musicals, but when I'm there because it's live, right, and it's an event, so that makes it categorically different than visual arts. And so I don't think it's a
Although,
problem in my
although I
view.
would, I would, uh, I would sort of challenge you from the perspective of action painting. So, we talked maybe before the debate about Jackson Pollock a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so, what is action painting? So, the idea is that painting is an action, right? We want to think of it as, an object, painting, but painting, to paint, is an action, right?
Yeah, no one's denying.
Okay. It's about, so we can read this essay called American Action Painters if you want, but basically, instead of approaching this as image making, you're using the act of painting to record
Yeah.
this sort of event. There are canvases are a stage, and they are essentially actors
Yeah,
acting on the
okay.
stage,
Yeah,
just as were sort of saying. So this is like their whole thing, right? So to understand this painting that just posted as just that, as this um, performance, this record of this performance.
mhm. So my response to that is that you're removing when you do that and you're calling that art, you're mislabeling it for the actual artwork that takes place, which is the painting. You're removing it from the act from its own world, right? You're removing the significance from it by then presenting this flat piece, right? The actual artwork that took place was in the painting there. Where with the other ones, right, you've created something that can be viewed and understood and it be self-sustained by itself. That's exactly why we preserve the specific representational art, right? Is because there's a quality of it specifically in itself, within itself, that makes it worthy of preservation or captures people's attention to preserve it, right? So the question is, if the action painting, if the act of painting there is the actual artwork that makes this like it's evoking something, right? Why is not Jackson Pollock's paintings not a video of him doing them? Like that's the important part, right? Why are we preserving the after effect removed from the actual event that is so paramount and evocative and so forth, right? This is the
I think that's
actual.
the exact. I think that's the exact point of
So
action painting,
this
right?
is so when
It's
with your
to it's to
with
speak
your
about, but that's true of any painting, right?
yeah, it's not true of
But
paintings
no,
which
no,
evoke
no, it
within
is
themselves.
because even representational painting, the true artwork there was in the performance of the painter, and that is forever lost.
But the
All we
piece
have is the
itself
record of
is
that.
doing work. And the piece itself, by itself, if this was computer generated, you wouldn't have a leg to stand on,
Um,
right? Because there's no work that was ever done, really. Like you would, is the program the art then? Is the
sure, but
pro
I could
that
say the
right?
exact. I mean, I would say that an AI,
And so like
artificial intelligence, could do
yeah,
art. I don't see a
your
problem with that.
critique of my view, which the Islamic art was supposed to do, runs against you here because you say that representing anything is like the ultimate deceit, the shadow
No,
of the
no,
form, and
I was
so
saying
forth.
that
And
that
this is the
is
very is exactly what that is. Like that's a mere shadow of the actual artwork.
sure, sure, but I guess you misinterpreted. I wasn't running the Platonic, theory of the forms
Yeah, I'm not
against you,
either, but
right?
yeah,
I'm just saying that that is part of the worldview of that Islamic painting or Islamic like tile piece, right?
sure, I'm not
That was
disagreeing with
that
you,
that was their notion, right?
but
So
I can
that
say
whole world is contained within this painting, just as like a whole world is contained within uh, your
you see the
shoes.
difference is you do not get that. You do not get anything from what you said from looking at the piece itself. But when you look at the other pieces, you like in the Picasso, perfect example of this, like that's unmistakably a face. And so you're getting all of that you're opening up into seeing the guy smoking a cigarette, right? And the turmoil there, like it's unmistakable,
Okay,
right?
so you say You
or
say
whatever he's doing.
unmistakable. Here, this let's discuss this painting
This one?
or this artwork. Yeah. Would you
Okay.
consider this abstract art?
Uh, is this of a like a geode or like a crystalline rock? Is that what this is of? Because if so, then yes. Else, no.
It is like a it is a like weird mold. It's some weird mold.
But is it actually of that mold? Then yes. But
No,
when
it
you have
is
something,
that mold. No, it is that mold.
it is.
It just is the mold.
Then did someone just put it there and let it grow? Then it's
Uh,
not. I'm not sure. Like I'm not sure at that's. I mean, my view is compatible with that being art. Um, I mean, this would be. I mean, then I would have to be committed to saying that seeing mold in a forest is art. That the
so
mold there is art.
so I guess this brings us into like the realm of
No.
abstract photography, right? So there is like actually this whole realm of photography and photographs that are like abstract
Those
photography.
are
So
perfect. Those are art. Those are art
okay,
because they're of something in the world.
but they are abstract also.
But they're of something in the world, and so you're
Okay,
getting
but
a
I would say that
view.
you cannot actually determine between like if we run a test, you would not be able to determine like to a sufficient degree between what is like an abstract painting and what is like an abstract photograph.
You see, you're missing the important part of the medium there, right? The matter that's being used. Like that's the essential difference here. The unity there is different
But
than between paint and canvas.
okay, so but your whole like applying form to matter thing is like, equally true of any abstract painting, right? That you have the canvas or your lump of stone. And equally true, you are revealing the shape that was like lying dormant in there through
Right.
your techne, right?
I
You are
wouldn't say it's
equally
lying dormant. I would not say it's lying dormant.
well, Heidegger would.
I'm not. I'm not running that.
Okay, but I mean that's what
I
the
don't think
revealing. That's what aletheia like reveals, right? That's what. Um,
it was something that was previously concealed.
yeah, like the statue that was in the rock.
Right.
But anyway, what
Sure.
I'm saying is that you're applying maybe a form to the rock. So you could
Right.
apply the form of like a squirrel, make a squirrel
Yeah,
sculpture.
so what's the
But you could
form
also apply.
of this mess? The first one. What's the form of that?
So you could, for example, carve like a geometric pattern within the rock, be non-representational.
Sure.
You could carve, um, you could just make like a smooth, weird blob shape that was like good to hold or something that was like ergonomic. You could do anything with that rock, right? You
Mhm.
wouldn't, you don't need to do a representation because I guess
Sure.
what you're
This is an
like,
aesthetic object.
like I agree. I think we both agree that, the nature of art is not to represent the world in itself. It's just to
Correct.
represent our phenomenal, its appearance to us
That's science.
normally. So that is, the essence of those appearances are these qualities that are represented
Right.
in abstract art. So just like music can like evoke feelings through harmony and time, this through spatial relationships and the relationships of colors to evoke emotion and also evoke the exact same sort of experience. And we all are now in the sort of space of interpretation, the world that this artwork has created. So as we sort of like discuss their very nature, we are like proving that they are like still enduring powerful pieces of art, right?
Pardon, what was the specific question?
My question to you, I guess I guess what do you gain? Like, because you kind of call this like a mess, right? So it
Yeah.
seems like, you know, what is behind your lack of charitability towards these works?
Well, it's a mess in terms of form. I can call it beautiful, and I'm fine with calling it beautiful, but the reason why we want to create this distinction, right?
I mean, but
is
this was
that
purely intentional, right? This was what he intended to do.
right, sure, sure, sure. But the reason that we want to be able to create this distinction, right? And the value of creating this distinction is because when we're admitting in this type of thing as being of the same category, right? What we're doing is we're concealing over the actual nature of representational art. We're concealing what's the essential character of that type of art by admitting this formless, we could call it, these for not of something, right? They don't have, and they're not representational, right? They're not evoking or opening up a world of relations, right? That are uniquely human and giving us human meaning beside them. When we're admitting that into the categorization, right, the actual representational art will then will lose, the actual essential characters that make it what it is. Because now it's equated with this other thing, which is radically different and does not do the same type of work that the representational arts do.
Okay, so okay, so would you consider the notion of collage or bricolage an art? So, like for
Uh,
anyone listening, that's like, you take a bunch of found art, you take some magazines, you cut them up, you like make a collage out of them, like a mishmash, different.
that's closer to art. That's closer to art.
Closer, but not
I'm
art.
not sure. I mean,
So, would you consider like a
I would
DJ,
consider it
a
poetry. So
musician?
yeah, I guess it would be a type of a weird type of poetry, I guess.
Okay, I mean, I'm fine with that. I
It
think.
would be a strange type of poetry. Yeah.
Okay, so could these paintings also not be, a weird type of poetry?
No, no, they're not, because the thing about your clippings is that they're distinctly linguistic.
But these colors aren't. These colors and shapes are not.
No, they are not. They're not linguistic.
Um, I mean, okay. I mean, we do need concepts to define them, right? Without linguistic concepts, everything would just be an indeterminate blur.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, well, it's not an indeter I mean, it's certainly not indeterminate, right? I'll grant you that. Like, it's not indeterminate. Like in
Well,
your
it would be
square painting,
because concepts would be what give the world determination, right? Or the or sense perception
I'm not
determination.
clear could you repeat where you're going here? I got lost a little bit.
You
Sorry.
got
It's
lost.
kind of
Okay, so
late.
I'm
It's
saying
kind of
like
late.
without language, we would not be able to like language is necessary for us to identify colors. So these colors and squares and shapes and everything are also linguistic elements, right?
No, you don't need language to identify colors.
So like
I
red is a
deny that premise.
signifier, right? It signifies
Yeah, it's
passion. It signifies like a toreador, or like a bull's, like a bullfight in the
not
cave.
inherently.
No,
You're putting that
it
onto
does
it. It's not
within.
telling you that at all.
Well, nothing
Telling you the
within.
opposite, I argue. It's telling you that red is the color of calmness. Why
I
why is
mean,
that interpretation wrong?
because that's not the feeling necessarily that red evokes. I think.
Here's the difference, right? That's your feeling, right? Your feeling, right? There's nothing in the artwork itself
Well, it
that
speaks to the
expresses this
world.
feeling of
You know.
redness.
Okay, so I think Heidegger and Husserl
Yeah, talk about
certainly
who's
agree to the fact that Husserl, who the Jewish philosopher who
yeah,
Heidegger
yeah, yeah,
stole the ideas from and then you know
kinda.
shoved into a closet. Um, yeah, I mean, he would agree that any artwork is only accessible within its world.
Yeah,
So,
right.
you know, we can never understand the Iliad truly because we are
Correct.
not like ancient Greeks or whatever.
I was about to bring up my previous historical point,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
but likewise, red maybe to like a Martian who lives on a red planet would mean like very different things, right? But to us, red symbolizes passion, it symbolizes love, it symbolizes anger, it symbolizes
To me, it doesn't. See, this is your subjective personal interpretation, but when we look at the water lilies, right, or the Picasso, even better example, right, there is like this, and the reason why these artworks are preserved, right, is because in them we're opened up into the ability to see the human in that way, to see the lilies in that way. While we're more abstracted, the farther away in time we are, right, it becomes harder and harder to enter that original space. It becomes harder and harder to get into the origin of that artwork, right? But when you have something that is completely divorced from any sense of world whatsoever, right? You don't even have that opportunity to get off the ground, right? Then it's purely contingent upon the current cultural mores of the time, right? There's nothing inherent, there's no essential character of it at all.
No,
It
there
lacks
there there
essence.
are there are there's the redness, the formal organization of the
I mean,
painting.
you're running language stuff too. So like in 2000 years, red is blue, blue is red, right? So like even talking about redness is not proper here. Like language starts to break down when you start trying to describe bare qualia like this, right? And that's why language isn't sufficient, and why poetry is different than, say, visual arts, and this is why music is separate from visual arts,
Sure,
right?
but I mean, you could say that this is visual poetry, and this would still qualify as art.
No, poetry is necessarily linguistic.
I mean, this is
Then
different
all of a
different
sudden,
qualities,
but you see the
different
pro.
shapes juxtaposed, right?
So like
This is
again, the
further further abstract. So let's look at this new
sure,
example before it
sure.
gets lost by chat.
Oh yeah, this guy. Yeah,
Okay.
I
So
actually like
abstract art, not
that.
abstract art. We're gonna play this game.
Abstract art or not abstract art.
Abstract art, not abstract art.
I mean, if you want to argue that that's a man there in the middle and you see his boots in his hand, then that's art. I
Uh,
could concede that that would be art.
so this is the guitar player by Picasso, right?
Yeah. Okay. There you go. See, I was right.
Okay. So is
Yeah,
this art?
that's art. Yeah, that's art. It's
Okay.
showing like the rhythm and the sheer experience of playing the guitar. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, of course.
But
Okay.
I see that you're why is your colored blocks, right?
Yeah.
Which is a nice painting. I'm not going to deny it. It looks nice.
Mondrians,
It's
man.
a painting
I
for
love
sure.
Mondrian.
It's a painting for sure. Right? But why can't that be the guitar player? It's obviously not. Right? It's obviously not the guitar player.
So
Right?
the
This is the
idea
guitar
is
player.
that so so what you're kind of doing is that you're saying like the painting needs to represent something to be art, right? Would you agree?
In order to be art, I would say specifically in a
It can't just be
visual
itself. It can't just
in
be a painting. It has to like be a painting of X, right?
for visual arts, yes. But again, poetry and music are different.
So I know there have been like a lot of people posting and like a lot of which is all good, obviously. I like love discussion, but
I
we
haven't
can
seen
kind
their
of see
in chat
maybe
really.
not that many people, but we can see sort of a progression through these styles. So we begin with the water lilies. We go to sort of like early Picasso. I guess there's no early Picasso. I should have posted one, but
Yeah.
it's fairly representational. And then it moves to a maybe the style of this lady here blowing her nose or crying, and
Yeah,
then eventually we get more and more abstracted, right? More
sure.
and more into the world of cubism, right? So as these things get more and more abstracted, we you know you can say we're losing the referent, but what we're doing is we're finding that the referent is just changing. It's no longer referring to a thing in the world, it's referring to a thing in our minds, right? Because our minds are part of the world in a certain extent, right? Like I can represent a- just the color red. I could have a painting that's just the color red or the color blue because that is an experience for me. If I stand in front of that, I'll have an experience. I'll be like, I will, you say that, it's going to be different. It might change. I mean, first of all artwork It's going to, change its meaning and become, inaccessible over time. But, you know, this is an experience and an interpretive space that we're like currently residing in. So I would agree it's more conceptual, but if as we look with like the fountain, right? It's not about the craft in this fountain or if this fountain represents anything. This fountain does not represent anything. This fountain is a fountain. It is, right? And likewise, these paintings are, right? They just are what they are. And like a bricolage or a found art, right? It is what
Yeah,
it is.
sure.
It's not representative. And what the artwork is the interpretive space that is created or the juxtaposition of this of it, a, a urinal in an art gallery, right? That statement and what that says about art and what and the boldness of it and all of the sort of rolled into one is going to be what you know artwork does not need to be representational to be artwork, I guess I want to
Mhm.
say. It can open up a space of interpretation. It can be what it is, um, and it doesn't need to represent something in the world. It can, because although maybe Heidegger doesn't have a correspondence theory of knowledge going on, Aristotle does.
Sure.
So within this is this notion that there's a world out there that you can contact, right? And the whole point of this art and the water lily and even Heidegger is that, you know, the true subject of art is our experience, right? And representing sort of subjective experience.
Yeah, but you see, consciousness, and quote your Husserl, right? Consciousness is always consciousness of something, right? Right? There's always something there. Emphasis on thing, right? There's always something there to grapple onto, and that's how conceptualization starts, right? Because when we just have bare qualia, right, which is what these sort of technical term, I think just like bare sensory input, right, which is how this stuff reads, right? And I think you would agree to that, right? That this is just like bare sensory input, right?
Well, no, because it also has formal organization. But like, let's talk about,
Yeah, but
one of them, the
formal,
gesteel.
not in the sense of like an object has a specific form. It's not in that sense of formal, right?
So what these paintings do is ask questions. Like the gesteel one is asking a question about painting. It's saying, how far can we, painting has gotten very complicated. Let's
Yeah,
simplify
sure.
it. Let's reduce it down as
But but
radically far down, and
but like
it's a
the
minimalist style, and it comes with, a design aesthetic, right? Like
yeah,
there's
sure.
gesteel furniture and stuff you
Yeah,
can buy
sure.
for your house, and like,
Yeah, that stuff.
yeah. So, and very much like, postmodernism begins as furniture, right? Begins as design. The idea is that these designs are ways of life that we can inhabit, right? We can be minimalists. We can be distillers. We can, you know, um, all, wear all red and white and form a rock band. I don't know. We can act these things out and inhabit a world that they create just as much as these lilies do, right? And as these lilies also represent only qualia, right? They don't represent the lilies, they represent the qualia. These also represent
Mhm.
the qualia.
Yeah, but they're not representative of them. They are that.
Okay. Yeah, they are them.
But
Sure.
you see, when the lily is there, right? If you want to use your example of lilies,
Sure.
or
Sure. Yeah, this is representative of art.
landscape
This is not
paintings are
representative.
particularly great at this, right? What was the landscape painting of like the little house in this huge sky? What was the name of that one? Spacing on the name. Anyway, you get these paintings which are great, right? But you see the difference here is that we're actually opened up in there and we can get like a sense of relationality, right? With the things that are there, right? They have meaning that are like self-invested within it. Like when you're looking at the water lilies, right? The bare qualia are fused together and they evoke the experience of looking at a pond, right? That's the world that we're entering inside of there. The bare qualia actually have a type of meaning put together with them. It's like reflective on two angles, right? One is the actual stuff on the canvas, right, of something, and then you have the canvas itself, right? The abstract art distinction, which is why it's important to make it right, it lacks that essential characteristic. Like that's the
Sure.
difference there. And
Right.
so I think
But
if
then
we're
how is your
going,
argument
I
sorry,
mean,
but how is your argument not like, I understand it
well, like,
doesn't
the
represent
point is that if we start admitting these abstract art pieces into the same category as everything else and calling them the same, that anything I put in a frame is now equal to the greatest artworks of Rembrandt, all right? They're equal in that sense, but they're really not. There's something dramatically different there.
it would
Like a
depend upon the
kid's
context.
drawing, a kid scribbling on paper put in a frame has the same aesthetic value as the other things when we start breaking down these definitions and opening up where art is this unbounded any type of sensory input whatsoever is art. Like then looking at the sunset is art, right? That
So
is art.
this is where you kind of get to a sort of a like a I don't want to you know but like a sort of a conservative position, maybe like to be charitable, like a Roger Scruton view of sort of like the degradation of art today. And I think that sort of just misses what is really going on and maybe where the artwork is occurring. So I would agree that, you know, um, maybe drawing these squares or whatever. I mean, thinking up their arrangement is, I think these are very aesthetically pleasing squares. I certainly wouldn't be able to do this, but
I could.
maybe just like the splatter one, like, okay, we could all make like a splatter painting. I don't know if it would, might have to make like 5 splatter paintings and sell like the best
Sure.
one or something. But okay, we could do that. But that ignores
But
the
how
whole
how
context,
is
the whole world that
How is
that this
Pollock's painting? How is Pollock's painting different than the splatter painting that I could do in my garage? What is the different
well,
things that
that too
those
would be art,
2
I would say. It would just be probably bad art or not the greatest, but
sure,
because
quality is a
because
different
the context
interpretation.
and I would say that so we can say that that would take less technique than like Michelangelo or whatever. Okay,
Sure,
that's fine. But there is more conceptual work that's being done. There's more like the where the artwork is taking place is changing. So if you have something like a collage, it's not your artwork is not in creating the things. It's not in what they represent. It's in taking these found things and then
yeah, that's
arranging
not
them in
my
a
my
certain way.
question is specifically, why is the Jackson Pollock evocative of what like your Muslim art example, right? Like, why is the Jackson Pollock evocative of one thing, but my art would be evocative of something else? Like, I think
So
you have to be able to make these distinctions between pieces. Otherwise, I mean, the only thing
so
separating one
so
from the other is
ultimately
the fact that they're
the
different
intent.
objects, like objectively, like in Descartes' sense, they're two different objects that don't inhabit the same space, right? They're just extended objects. Like, what's the essential difference between the two? We can do that easily with representational art, and why it should be called art is because of that quality that they have.
Okay. Well, I mean, so what you can say is that like this, which is a record of the dance of painting,
Sure,
you could, you know, dance and paint, right? And you too could record yourself dancing and painting, right? And
sure,
I wouldn't make a value judgment. Maybe your painting is like better than this or whatever. But
sure.
what
Value
he's
judgments,
saying
yeah,
is that he's making a comment through this painting on um, the nature of painting. He's saying that
so how
we
do you
should not
derive
focus
that?
on we should not focus on the single painting. We should focus on the process of painting. We should
Right,
like
and
focus on
I've
the
agreed
finished
with you to
product.
that, but then the artwork is filming him doing it.
So, but
That's
what
the
he's
real
saying,
art.
what this painting says is a conceptual statement, right?
How do you
And
get that?
simply by looking at it and thinking about what these splashes could represent and what they mean, what they're trying to say. Maybe not represent in
Uh,
like a conventional sense, but
I'm gonna
what they
do,
mean.
we're gonna play this game. Not random.
So I agree that these non-representational pieces are not representational, but they are in some way like, a band would release CDs and you'd listen
Sure.
to some classical music on CD, right? It is not the classical music, as you said, it's not nothing like going to a live show, right? Um, but it is a record of the dance that was had, of the music that was played. It's non-representational. That's fine,
Sure.
but it remains art because it opens up this interpretive space. It opens up feelings. You are having a very strong reaction to it, right? And, your artwork would conceptually say maybe something different. It might say, you know, I think all artwork is shitty. Maybe you'd be able to convey that through your artwork, maybe you wouldn't. But Jackson Pollock was sort of able to convey that through this artwork, and that's why he is
But he's
recognized
he's
highly.
not conveying that in the artwork. He's
Yes, he
conveying
is.
it because that's what people have interpreted from his actions. It's
Right,
not
but
the artwork that's conveying that.
but
The
there's
actual
no
image is not conveying that.
but you agree that you can't
So I think that
separate your experience
this
of the
image,
artwork from
this
its
image that I
interpretation.
just posted makes the exact same statement that you just did. It makes the exact same statement.
I mean, you could say that, but what I'm
Why
saying
why
is that
in the
any
process
any
there to make that, I think it looks cool. I see, like, marbling, right? It's a call for the very nature and process of art making. We extol all these virtues that you've been extolling of the Jackson Pollock. It's the exact same statement that Jackson Pollock is making. The fact that it doesn't
okay, but
inherently
how
have
many
that statement within it.
what was your dancing though? How much dancing did you do
I
to
did a lot of dancing while making it. I did a lot of dancing.
No, you didn't though.
Yes, I did.
I don't think you did.
Oh,
Because
so
let
now
me
now
look
now
at
you
I
see,
can't
you're
see the
agreeing with
dance
me
here.
now,
I
right? It's
can't
the
see the
act.
dance here,
Well, yeah, you
right?
can't 'cause it's online, right, exactly, that's the
No, no,
point.
no, no, but I can see the dance in the Jackson Pollock painting, right? He danced over here, he danced over there,
You're just not
splash,
looking hard
splash.
enough.
I can see the action, right? I can see the visceral nature, the very like, oh, this is an action painting, splash, splash. I'm a painter. I'm Jackson
Yeah, you
Pollock,
see, I took great care to make those little tendrils of green going to evoke that same thing.
No, but you didn't.
Yes, I did.
But
Yes, I did. What were you
there's no
telling me now?
record. I don't see that anywhere here. Sorry. I see
There's the difference.
I
That's why
see maybe
abstract art is
colors
not
different.
art, by your own admission. You can't see it. You can't see it because it says nothing, just like the Pollock. It says
No, no,
nothing.
but that was
You admit.
no,
You
that
have
may be
to agree
saying
with
whatever
me
object
here if
it
you're defending the abstract art over here.
is. Okay. But it is what I'm saying is that this art is different than the other art and thus says
They're
different things.
different objects. I'll
Yeah,
agree
they're
with
different objects. Yeah, they're not equivalent. And so, just like a solid red painting, it's going to say something different than a solid blue painting, right? We wouldn't, or like any one of these paintings, we wouldn't say like, the Picasso guitar painting is the exact same as the water lilies, right? That
No,
would
of
be
course not. No, no. Yeah, yeah, that's obvious. That's not
right.
but, like,
So,
why
so
are all of a
any
sudden
any
you're not
abstract painting,
ascribing
so any arrangement of
mhm,
pure qualities, though
yeah, which is
non-representational,
this? This is
have
arrangement of pure qualities.
formal arrangement, right? There's
Mhm.
they are the matter, these formal qualities,
This is a
and they
formal
would
arrangement by your definition.
right. And this might say something also. This could say something about like the beauty of
So
the
how can
interplay
you
of a big
tell
rainbow.
exactly? My
Who
one of
knows?
I mean,
But
my
we
key
can
point.
this opens an interpretive space, right? The thing is we can't know for sure.
Sure, it
And,
opens
and
an
because
interpretive space. I'll
true.
agree that it opens an interpretive space, but it
So
doesn't open an actual space of meaning where meaning is conveyed through the work. Meaning isn't conveyed here through the work itself. Right? That's the difference. That's the difference between art and, a very beautiful, or we could make a new category of abstract aesthetic objects. That's fine. And it does all the things, great things that you say it's doing, but it's
no, but
just an
this
abstract
does bear
aesthetic
meaning,
object.
right? We can't like if I look at that and say that pixel there is red and that
Yeah.
pixel there is green, And
Correct.
actually, it looks to me like there are most of these pixels are green, but then there are a lot of purple ones too.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm able to interpret this. There is meaning here, and it is. I would agree, mostly, not a window into the world of like a peasant who, Heidegger being a Nazi obviously idealized the world of like the lower class in a kind of like sort of semi-disgusting way. But we do have to say that, it is a window, it is itself an arrangement, right? Someone made this, I guess, or
Mm.
perhaps it was like a random generation. I'm not really sure. But we can set this as our wallpaper for a while and live in the world that it
Yeah.
creates.
So,
Uh,
like, okay, here's another test. Does this one evoke
so
anything
so
different
much
than
like
the last one?
music, right? This one, is pretty much random noise. So I'm not seeing much random noise. Well, that one's a bluer one. Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean,
The
these are
Jackson
beautiful.
Pollock's a yellower one, a darker one, a redder one, but
These are beautiful artworks. Cool Dog. Did you create these?
I did create these. It took a lot of time.
Okay, so I would say that you're probably, you're creating these to be confounding images. This artwork, I would label
Correct.
like
That's why I
enigmatic.
created them. I
Yeah,
created
this
them to be a
artwork
confounding
calls
image.
into question the very nature of artwork,
But
right?
these
We're all here
these
to
are
witness it.
these are random.
No,
These are
but
actually
these
random.
are intellectual and interpretive pieces, Cool Dog. So you actually now are
You can
an abstract
interpret
artist.
whatever you want,
No, no,
but the
you are an abstract artist. How does it feel to be?
it feels I'm not an artist.
Can you
Not an
sign? You
artist.
should sign both of those
Yeah, I
pictures
should.
together.
That would ruin them, though. It would ruin them.
Um,
It would very much ruin the point, as you would say.
maybe.
But yeah, you see, the point is that this does not, and you see that's the difference here, right? Because we're now admitting random qualia, literally, and this one I did on the second one, I did change the blue
No,
slider, so you
selected
could
with
argue,
intention. Selected with
you could
intention.
argue that the second one
No, but you
is not
selected
random.
you selected random
The other one I
to
didn't.
be
The
the
other one
most
I did not.
enigmatic.
The other one I did not. I did
No,
not
you
select
did.
anything.
No, you did. You
So,
made this.
the point being, right, is that now all of a sudden all random qualia that we just put somewhere is
No,
now
not
art.
all of it. Just this one that you created, and these two.
I don't think that we should admit literal random qualia into the definition of art.
No, but he
I don't
is
think so.
making. You're making art. These are conceptual art pieces you've made here. Cool Dog.
They open up an interpretive space, but they do not open up a space that
Don't
delivers us
hurt
any
anything.
truth. It
No,
doesn't uncover anything in itself.
no,
The
it
shoes
it asks
do. The
questions that are
Picasso
very
does.
you've revealed. So you've
The
applied a formal
the patheticness of your
arrangement.
argument, my dear opponent.
No, no, you've applied an arrangement to some matter. The arrangement you chose was random to be the most enigmatic, but you chose it, and so yeah, there you are.
So
It was a,
simply
a
calling something art makes it art. I
in the
think
same
that
way that
that's a
Jackson
great
Pollock,
position to
right?
hold.
The
It's a
same way that
great
Jackson Pollock has his brush, right? And in like an action way, he flicks the paint, it goes whoosh onto the canvas. He doesn't control exactly where it goes. You have not controlled exactly where all of these colors go, but you have, in creating these images, flipped the paintbrush.
You could say that in a sense, but again, I'm again gonna say that the event. It's so the only way that I would sort of agree with you and find middle ground is that the abstract art is art in quotation, right? Is closest to music, but it is the performance itself that is evoking some truth, right? It's not the actual piece of visual art that is art. These are not actual art, right? Yeah, Arco's saying that silence is music. Yeah, that's a great point, but it's not, right? Random noise is not
Well,
art.
John Cage, like that was music.
I mean, if it's I would John
However
K.
many
Justice,
minutes,
7 minutes of silence or
yeah,
whatever.
there you go. Yeah.
That's not art under my definition. That would not be art. That would
Yeah,
not be
4 minutes and
foreign as
33 seconds.
yeah, that's not art under my definition. That would
Right.
not the
But I would
performance of
say
it is. The
I
performance of it is performance art, but it's not music.
no, I mean, a rest is a musical note, right? Or like a musical notation. Just how
Yeah,
many rests.
but that's like a mathematical thing. You're equating
So
like math.
so
You're
what it
then
does
equating
is
like
it's
mathematical
conceptual,
notation to
right?
art.
It calls into question the very notion of what is considered music, right? It
Mhm.
is, a conceptual piece, right? The thing is you're maybe looking for the art in
But
the wrong place, I would
that
argue.
calling
So
is
so
contextually
so
dependent.
while we can agree, like, the idea of thinking of up writing like 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence is genius, right? But actually like composing 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence is I could compose 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. Ha. But that is not where the art is. Where the art is between the viewer and the piece, right? In their relationship and that interpretive space that is created. You can't you can't say like, oh, the piece is bad. But what about the interpretive space? This whole space is incredibly rich
But
with
so is your
interpretation
just to
and
clarify,
reaction.
is your definition anything that opens up an interpretive space is art?
Um,
If no, you're in deep trouble because then I mean, if yes, I mean, I don't understand this position.
so I would say that anything created in like a uh, formal way, in that you've imposed your um, form on something, like
Mhm.
in a sort of like, there is a natural thing, but then you have shaped it into a statue, for
But
example.
you see now I think
That
that
opens an interpretive space.
so like I saw that somebody else earlier was talking about like is chemistry art, for example, right? It seems what you're doing here is now we're conflating like art and art, right? Where like you have the art of engineering, the art of chemistry is like,
Well,
pure
no, that's
technique.
what Heidegger does, right? Because both those notions are contained in techne.
Yeah, right. I know that. But like there's a distinction to be made. Like in English, they mean two different things, right? In English.
Right, right. So what
English.
I'm saying, yeah,
It's like
that
art of engineering, and so the art of creating interpretive spaces is different than like an actual entity that is artwork.
so like to create an interpretive space rather than to have one like naturally arise, because I
But
wouldn't
you
say
see,
that
the
that is art.
problem is that I'm gonna come to you with is that any everyday action is potentially creating an interpretive space. Any action whatsoever is potentially intentionally not potentially, but is intentionally creating an interpretive space for what that action means. Everything is art now, which means that art is meaningless at that point. Like what? Yeah, what isn't art?
Yeah, so I wouldn't go down necessarily that road. So I would say that, you do need to I don't mind like the Heideggerian or the Aristotelian view of art, right? We sort of assumed that for this debate, so I would just like agree with that, right? But that by its very nature does create an interpretive space, right? It's not simply about the work. It's about the subject, the object, and the relation
Yeah, but
between
I'm
them.
still unclear as to why.
So, for example, if you
Why
if you watch a movie, right? If you watch
movies are art?
let's say you watch a David Lynch movie, right?
Yeah, great, love it.
Okay. You like were hit with a bunch of enigmatic images. They were all like maybe most of them representational, but the story that he was telling that you like completely did not understand is over here, and then like the interpretive space is actually quite large, where the the artwork is
Right.
standing there, and then there's like the interpretive space around the artwork.
But you see,
And
like,
as you
the difference here is that, like, in David Lynch, right, the reason why those movies work, I'm thinking of, like, Eraserhead, or you could do, like, Holy Mountain, Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain, right?
Sure.
right? The reason why those work, right, is because there are people there, and there's this, and it's the reason why it opens up that interpretive space in such a strong way, right, is because of the fact that there is this bizarre world that you're invited to enter into, right? The
Right.
relationality and meaningfulness of objects is entirely different, right? Like the Eraserhead baby is like, what does this mean? Because we're put into this weird bizarro land. The fact that we're using these terms like bizarro land or whatever implies this opening up, right? It's revealing something about us as humans because there are humans there, right? You know, if you were to put, for example, a still image on a movie projector and play it for 45 minutes, I would say it's art, but it's not art in the movie sense, right? It's art in a photographical sense. It's not art in a movie sense. Just like maybe the 4 and 33 minutes or whatever, right? That's not art in a musical sense. It's not musical art, right? It's not musical art.
Um, yeah, I mean, it is, I mean, I don't see how you can justify music as art if you don't acknowledge that
I'm saying that music is art, but I think that the 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence is like a play, right? It's performance art.
okay, but then it would still be art. But you
Right,
could say
but
it's
you see
not
the
music.
difference with our visual abstract arts, right? Right, but you see in the event of actually watching that performance, right, there's still a guy at the piano, there's still something there,
Right, and
right?
there would be a guy at the piano during
In
the 4
your
minutes and
sense,
33
the
seconds of
only
silence.
thing you have is bare matter. That's the only thing you have. But in these other things, we have the presence of form on the canvas, right? That's
No,
the
no, but
difference.
you have a form on the canvas
No, we
within
don't.
abstract painting. It is just a, a
Only
non-referential
in the
form.
mathematical sense do you have squares or
So,
rectangles,
so in the
right?
sense that,
Only in the
I
math.
think what you're doing and what Heidegger does is he assumes a kind of immediacy. Maybe not Heidegger, but I think what you're doing is we'll keep my claim just like very modest. Is you're assuming a kind of immediacy with the world, as if we could understand the world directly without some kind of categorical or categorical or concepts to frame that world in. So in some sense we have a more intimate experience with these categories, these qualia, than the world in itself. Like we can't
No, we
understand a sensuous blur. We have to put qualities and boxes around it, right? Just like
see.
this dish deal painting. We have to.
See, I disagree because it's the very expression of that conceptualizing ability that makes representational art art. It makes abstract art not art because it doesn't do that work. It's not doing any work there. You're the one doing all the work and you're interpreting. The art itself is not working.
Well, you can say that it does not represent and therefore doesn't work, but it does work in the sense that it provides me with qualia that
That's you, yeah, but
give me an
anything
impression.
does that. Everything is art now because everything provides equality. And
that,
everything
that give
can't
me
be
an
art.
impression in an interpretive space. And I would say that
I mean, it seems like
things
your
like found
definition of
art,
art,
things like
and I would
found art
more
do ask the question of what differs, like what makes art, right? So you can think about, the Marcel Duchamp. Was that urinal art when it was, just a urinal? Or did it become art when it was, put up in an art gallery? Like what this says is that what is considered art is actually a matter of, historical um, power relations, right? It you can be an art. What is considered art
I
is,
disagree there. I mean, I agree in
determined by
part,
a group of
not
people, right?
completely.
So if you have, a number of people who say that something is art, then that thing is art, right?
Yes, see, I just don't think that you want to go down the road of whatever we call art is art. I
Yeah, but
really
what
don't.
I'm saying is
I
that
really hope you're not going down that road.
these artworks are conceptual pieces that call into question the very nature of artwork, right? By juxtaposing things and their contexts. So you can create art like a simple metaphor, right? By
Mhm.
putting something where it doesn't belong, right? You don't need to represent something. You don't need to have something else. The purest form of art is poetry, right? That depends upon objects
I would
themselves,
maybe
using
disagree.
words not for the representational quality, but for their quality, right? Like
I
the
would
sounds of the
disagree
words.
with you that poetry is the highest form of art. Disagree with you.
Okay.
I
Um,
don't think you rank art like
okay,
that.
okay, okay. We don't need to go down that road, but I would say that you can accomplish poetry, right, by juxtaposing various things with one another, right? You don't
Sure,
need so these various qualities can be juxtaposed with one another in the
sure.
same way in a painting, right? Um, you don't
Yeah,
need
your problem is that anything that you call art is art, and anything that you don't call art is not art, right? So I say abstract art is an art, and it seems hard that my opinion should be taken differently than anybody else's.
right. No, I'm not here to like harp on your sort of personal choice, right?
Yeah,
Like
that but you
you
see,
can
you're
dislike
reducing
it
art
as
you're
art.
reducing the definition of art to personal choice. Like, that's the problem with your view, right? That's a problem with your view. You do acknowledge that, right?
Um, Well, no, I would simply like I would disagree with you about the essence of art. I think you're mistaken about it. I just and
Yeah, sure.
hopefully through discussion we can like
Yeah, but why is my definition of art worse than another one, right? And
right
you
because
see, again,
it's
your
in this
definition is
right
purely subjective. What I say it is, it
right
is.
to
It's
engage in
like
sort of abductive reasoning here.
like,
To
what is
uh,
pornography? I know it when I see it, right? That's your definition, right?
oh, um, I mean, I'm not putting forward. I don't think I have to meet
You
the
don't.
constituents of the debate. Have to put forward my own view of art. I just need to show that there could possibly be some type of abstract art that is actually art.
But you see, the point is that once we start, like, adding in, like, you admitted that the random generation, right, is art. When we start letting in all of these things, art becomes
Well,
a meaningless term now.
all art has a certain amount of randomness in it, right? The
Well, sure,
materiality
of course,
of
of
the
course.
of
No,
the
but you see the point that
material.
I'm getting at, right, is that now the definition of art has exploded.
No, because there still remains intentionality. If you take away maybe the intentionality, I don't know if it would exist. I think maybe I grant the fact that like an AI could have
So if
intentionality and create art.
intentionality matters, then found art is not like, why is found art under your
Oh,
definition of
because no,
intentionality matter?
simply for the reason poetry is art, because you've taken one thing that's in one place and you've put it in a new context.
Yeah, so me just throwing a stone while I'm walking down the road is now art.
It's sort of
Oh,
like a pun, right? No, because if you
why
put
not?
something
I call it art. It's art to me. I throw it very artfully. I evoke the happy-go-lucky attitude I have when I'm walking down the street.
you've imparted form. You haven't really imparted any form into this. I guess you've imparted speed to it. You're throwing it,
So
putting
performance
it in
art
a
is an art
context.
then. Like, you'd have
I
like
mean, you could do like a dance or whatever. You could do some performance art. I guess are there viewers of this art? Are you doing this performance for anyone? Just doing
so
it
I
for
can't
yourself?
make art just for myself. That's ridiculous.
No, I'm just
That
asking.
can't be
I'm trying
true.
to I'm trying to
It's
clear up
irrelevant.
this.
There can be like, people walk down the street and they see me throw the little rock, they see me do it.
Yeah, maybe you're just doing. See, what I think is that you kind of like you've created this definite or Heidegger has created this definition, and it's limiting. It
Yeah,
seems to be limiting your appreciation of these pieces, right? So, like
not
from
no,
a
it's
real point of view, like we the ends of liberal education, right, should be to help us all appreciate the fine
but,
arts.
like,
Raise our
I
pleasures.
can co-opt your case, right? Because I can get all of whatever goods or whatever meanings or interpretations you're having. I'm just purposefully wanting to separate that from, art. I
But
wanna
what
say
it
that's a
seems to
different
come with
class
is a
of thing.
value judgment, right? I think I think
It doesn't
these
necessarily. You're
categories.
putting that on me. You're putting that on. That's unfair.
Well, you could say that that's true, and I
That's
would like
unfair.
agree. I would believe any kind of categorization like this has a sort of a inherent like hierarchy built into it. You're trying to say that, you're trying to purify art. You're trying to say this is art, this is too impure, this is not art,
But,
right?
like,
And
categorization
you kind of called
categorization,
some of
you've
these things
admitted
methods,
one of
right?
the
So do you like Pollock? Do you respect it as like artwork?
I
No.
find some abstract aesthetic objects beautiful. In fact,
Okay.
I have, like, a geometric, kinda like your Muslim art, I have a tapestry on my wall of
Oh,
something like
sick.
that. I find it beautifully aesthetically pleasing. Do I call it art? No, it's not art. But no, it doesn't ruin my appreciation necessarily. I'm not making value judgments. You seem to have been making value judgments against my creation a little bit earlier, right? You're the one who's wanting to constantly draw these value judgments. I'm not. I'm just drawing categories and using conceptualization. That's all I'm doing.
Right. No, I mean, I would simply question why you're drawing these categories, right?
Again, to reserve a space, right? And because the thing is, when we start allowing everything to be art, right?
Exactly. So what you
Concealing,
so
we're
this is like
concealing.
essentially like a fascist thinking, right? I know you're not fascist, but Heidegger is. So he's seeing this
Yeah,
like
see, now you're
pureness.
ad hoc. You're
No,
off the
no, no,
actual
no. But
position.
let me explain the ad hom, right? So that what he's saying is that there's this pure type of art that existed long in the past when art was real art, but like it's under attack by these decadent, like sort of like conceptual, overly intellectual, like left wing effetes who are like coming and like taking away like the true
I mean,
essence of art.
that's
So what we need to do is build a wall, make art great again. Let's go back to like Roman iconography, the
when I
time when it was
express this like
time
position,
when
this
men were men.
out of left field. I don't understand what the argument here is. I'm not doing that at all. I'm just saying that like when you start admitting everything into being art, right? You're concealing the actual true nature of certain types pieces of art and what they're actually doing. Your concept loses its value. So like for the value of the concept and for even the value of abstract art in quotation, right? In order to preserve that value too, we need a separate categorization for which I forwarded as abstract aesthetic object.
Hmm. But I would just what is so would you say that found art is an abstract aesthetic object but not an art work?
Uh, I mean, this
You
gets
seem
tricky,
you
right?
seem pretty happy to say that the fountain was an
I
artwork, right?
think I'm more willing to call that art than a geometric painting. I'm not necessarily sure where exactly the I'm not sure if that's abstract, right? That's not abstract. That's the problem. Like it's not abstract,
No,
right?
no, but the idea is that it's non-representational. It simply
But
is
it
what it
is,
is.
it's a thing. Like it is I mean,
No,
there
it
isn't
simply
that
is.
abstract quality.
No, but
It's
it
not
simply
abstract.
okay, but it is non-representational.
I'm not sure if it is. I'm not sure if it's non-representational. I mean, it's a sculpture, it's a thing. Like all sculpture, I mean, sculptures, I could say the same thing about all sculpture then, you
No,
know.
but like a sculpture of like a man would represent a man.
Sure, but like a sculpture of a an inanimate object that's not a plant, a corkscrew which is sitting on my desk, or a knife, a sculpture of a knife, right?
Well, a sculpture of a knife would represent a knife.
But it also is a knife.
No, a knife is a knife. Knife is not a sculpture of a knife.
Right, and so, like, the found art bucket is a representation of a bucket, it's not just a bucket, even though it is a bucket in some sense, right? Just like the sculpted knife is a knife in some sense, right?
Well, I mean the knife, if you were to turn it into a found art object, would still be a knife, and that knife in a new context would be the art.
But, like, you can make a knife out of stone, right? People have done that, like, it's still a knife.
Sure, are you saying that like a
Sculpture of
statue
a
of a
bucket
knife is
is
still
still
a
a bucket.
knife because you can stab someone with it? I mean, yeah,
No, it's
okay.
still a knife, like, you can cut I mean, I don't see you can it's the same thing, right? Like, a sculpture of a bucket is still a bucket, right? because that's sculpture. Sculpture's different than see, that's the representational part, only comes with
Sure,
like paint,
but you
right?
could do a sculpture of a bucket in like a impressionistic sense, right? Like sculptures do
Yeah,
not have to be
right.
fully
Sure, but it's still
representational.
like a bucket
I would
though.
have like a hole in the bottom of it or whatever, or like just be
Yeah,
completely like,
sure,
you've
sure.
done like the sort of like gestural lines of the bucket, but it's like doesn't hold water. So it would just not be a bucket.
But
Similarly,
you're kind of getting the point that like you're found art just because you say it's not a bucket, right? Doesn't make it not a bucket.
no,
Like
but this found
oh,
art
it's
is directly what it is, I think
yeah,
you
I
could
mean
say.
like but all things are directly what they are.
But it's non-representational. Like in the same way that
Don't
like
get that. I don't buy
so
into that.
so it seems like you're like what is different than just these squares on the piece of paper or the canvas, right? So the squares, you could just say that, oh, they represent,
Right.
like,
The
what do the squares
difference
represent?
is that the squares are barely see, like, unlike, sculptures, right? See, the squares barely are just squares on pieces of paper. That's what I'm arguing, right? They are just an aesthetic object,
Okay, but
right?
they could then be still art because you've said that found art also
Yeah, but you see
is
the difference there is that the actual artwork that's being purported is that is the like you've said this before, right? It's that those qualia that they evoke on the piece of paper, right? Because then any piece of paper is art under your view, and we've been down that road before. It can't be the case,
I
right?
think
Any
if
piece of paper
something
is
is
art.
taken for art, I'm willing to grant it being art.
I mean, like I mean, the issue is, I
Alright.
mean, it's
Yeah,
not,
maybe if there's some intention behind it. If something with intention is taken with art to be
but
art.
everything has intention behind it. Literally
Yeah,
every
I would say ultimately these lines are not there's no essence of art, right? The
yeah,
problem with
no,
your whole argument here is that you've stuck upon some essence of art that art has to have, and if it doesn't have,
because
all
that's how
match this
that's
essence.
how concepts work. Your conceptualization, which you agreed is super important, right? Super important, right?
Right, but I would say that
So,
to
like,
be stuck on
when
a
we're
senseless
collapsing the
notion would
concept
be
of art,
wrong, right? So
like we're
similarly, if you were like a you believed everything about an entire class of people, right? If you just believed, as Heidegger says, that's just the type of
now you're
beings we
ad
are,
homing it. Yeah, right, sure.
right? So you believe in like essentialist notions, or you would, right? And so what I'm saying is that that would be harmful. So similarly, you should not
I don't
have like
believe
an
that. I'm not
essentialist
committed
notion
to
towards artwork. You should simply,
you're not attacking
view
the position.
anything, that people treat as artwork, right?
Yeah.
And kind of just like, in the Wittgensteinian sense, there is a family resemblance of things that we call artwork.
Mhm.
Nothing says that artwork has to have all the qualities. There, it can have, a similarity um,
But
with
yeah, now
other artwork.
you're confusing, like, the collection for the actual concept here.
Right. I guess I'm saying that any concept is going to be
Now we
derived ultimately from this collection of artwork, right?
right,
You
exactly,
can,
exactly. Sure, I'll grant you that.
right, and
But
this
then,
behavioral
like,
practice that
why does this so how does these abstract artworks in quotation marks, how do they fit into the family? Why are they part of the family?
because they display a graphic representation
But they
of
don't.
form, or sorry, a graphic depiction of form in the manner of painting arranged in such a way as to evoke responses
I would
within the
appeal
world,
to the audience to say,
and to
if
create an interpretive
if
space.
you cannot see a form or
No, but you
figure,
can.
you cannot see a form
You
in
can
the
see a
Jackson
formal
Pollock
arrangement
painting,
without seeing.
if you cannot see a form in the Jackson Pollock, you vote for me. Partly because, this is really interesting because part of Jackson Pollock's work that was so questioning the nature of art, which you extolled the virtues of, was partly because it was formless. Right? That's like part of the point. Right? There's no form there. That's kind of the point. right? That's why it's a different type of thing.
Right, but it is exactly a questioning of that, right? And it does have intention behind it, right?
But
And
again,
it's the
has
record of the action, and it is a reconceptualization of the nature of
I mean,
music, right?
you're gonna be committed, like, to some strange positions where, like, political speeches are art, right? You're gonna be committed to that as poetry of some sort because it has an intention to disrupt conceptualizations of things. It's just like I think is exploding the concept beyond
Right, but I haven't put
bounds.
forward a positive definition of art. All I'm saying is that your definition leaves out a
Yeah,
number of things.
you think my definition is narrow. I get that, but,
Hmm.
like, your lack of a definition and the objects that you are admitting into it and the reasons that you're admitting them into art
So
imply
I would just say that there
a lot of
is no definition of art,
things.
right? So to say that I hold a definition is wrong, right? Like
Okay,
we could
no
say like this is art, this isn't art. I would say like we could look down the list of things that we might consider art and say that it has like four of the seven attributes. We could say, have a choice about is this considered art? I think ultimately though, and what um, found art sort of says is that what is art is all about context. It's all about power and access to art galleries and art critics and audiences and
again, the
yeah,
difference is that in the things that I call art, right, they have context within them in themselves.
sure they represent things because you
The
do not
the
favor
the
abstract art,
reason
right?
why I think it's important is because that seems to be one of the most we can use family resemblance, right? That seems to be and it's the reason why we want to preserve certain things, right? That seems to be one of the more bigger, bigly incorrect grammar, right? It seems to be one of the, more salient or more stronger elements of your family resemblance, right, is this ability to convey context, especially in painting, right?
I would say
And
that
abstract
it
art
can.
art quotation is without that.
Sure, but the lack of one element does not mean that you're
Sure,
not
but the lack of a major element makes you really start to question, all right? Makes you really start to question. Because like, it's not just like
So
all of these
I would
elements
encourage you to question it, but I think upon questioning it, we can sort of say like, we shouldn't have an essentialist notion of what art is that excludes ourselves from possibly appreciating and enjoying all sorts of things that maybe, we did not consider this art. Maybe we look down upon it. I think, we do need to interpret and stand in front of and examine all sorts of, abstract art, whether it's,
I'm not
a vase.
denying this. My position does not deny this at all.
Right, but then to say that this is not art because it is not representative, then your
Right.
position would be like I know your position isn't circular. Like I agree these aren't representative, but what you have to show is that the fact that they aren't representative means they are not art.
It's not
But
just not
but
representative.
right, because we've agreed that like the
All other characteristics that they lack,
right,
right?
because we've agreed that,
We've been
collage
debating,
is
we've
representative.
elucidated a ton of characteristics, right, that art, has, right? And these
So
abstract
what
objects,
characteristics
like
beyond
a ton,
representation?
beyond representation, contextlessness, right? That was one, right?
Because why?
Tell me how my random object implies a context from itself.
So
The
any
peasant
so the
shoes
art
do,
gallery, like the very point of putting a fountain in an art gallery is to give it context, right? The space
right,
and
but the
the
Dada
place for
art
art is the gallery, right? To
is
just look at the fountain, at this urinal, and just be like, well, there's no context. You know, uh, would be
right,
to
that's like
say,
for the Dadaists, and you know this, are particularly into performance art, right? That just like music, right? There's a context inherent in the actual event or doing of that art, right?
yeah,
That is different
yeah,
than when you have a preserved entity, an
Right,
object.
right. But the action painters similarly would view art as this process. They want to see painting not
Right,
as a painting, but as painting, as the activity of painting.
right.
So they
And
want
so,
to shift that.
like, them being there, watching them do that is a type of performance art. I'm not denying that. All right.
Okay, and
Partly
that is
because of this contextualization element that you're so elucidating that the actual end result, the end product in itself does not have,
so
right?
what I'm saying is that the very quality of like putting it in a museum, yeah, like I say what you're saying, like the very content of it is not art, but
Right. The
you are
reason
missing
why
the
we
art
put
in its
certain
very
paintings
form,
in the
right?
museum, like why do we put certain paintings in a museum? Right? Because there's something about them themselves, about those objects, right?
Yeah,
Right? Something in the object, about the object.
so
Have
like
me
the
entertainment,
urinal, for
right?
example, right? There's nothing in
Going on for
itself,
2 hours.
like there's nothing in the context of the urinal that makes it art, right? It's formal.
That's like performance art, and you know this about the Dadaist. You know that about them.
Okay,
Like,
but we could say
the
that
same
abstract
people
art then is performance art,
paper.
and it would still be art.
Yeah, but it's art in one sense, but not art in another sense. Like, but it's not like the abstract artwork, the actual. I think you're committed to claiming that the painting itself has to be art, right? I'm
Um,
claiming that the painting itself is not art. It's an abstract art, and I don't think that the action of painting is abstract. Right? That's not. It's very concrete. That's like the opposite of abstract. We've been over this before, right? Like, that's the very opposite of abstract. He's actually literally doing something. Right? He's literally placing it there. Right?
hmm.
That's the performance art there. It's that literal concreteness that makes it so profound. That the actual painting another thing, concreteness, right? Abstract artworks do not convey concreteness at all. I think you have to agree to that.
Um,
You said it's the mind at once.
I mean, I think that they
Opposite.
provide a kind of phenomenal concreteness. Like if you look at those very textural,
Both in
uh,
some,
like a
you
very
know,
textural
simple.
abstract painting with like heavy oils. I think that kind of thing does display a kind of like mental state, right? I think it can explain and describe how we live and how we experience the world even better, just like those lilies, and don't need to be a perfect representation of the world. That it's actually better to
Never claimed that representations have to be perfect. My example was an impressionist
right,
painting.
right, right. But just like you don't need a representation, like a perfect representation, you want to the mood, right? We
I'm
can
just trying
imagine an abstract painting that captures the mood of a migraine headache, right? There's no way to draw or depict a migraine headache, right? You'd have to use an abstract painting
I
to
mean, you
depict
could
something like
argue
that.
that Picasso kinda does this in some of his paintings.
Right. And you could use representation if you'd like,
But there's
maybe.
nothing there that can connect or make that referential ability there. You're the one doing the work. That's the difference. Like art, like especially in like the paintings, right? Which is the class of like that's the properly abstract art, right? I would say like properly speaking. Right? Those things, you're the one. That's another characteristic that it doesn't share with representational artwork here, right? Is you're the one who's front loaded to do all this interpreting to do a major part of figuring out what the hell this thing is.
Sure, but that exists also within any artwork, right? But I
Yeah,
would
but
agree
not at
it
the
is
level.
it is it is
There's a
more emphasized. It's
there's a
definitely
like you're saying
emphasized more.
this evokes the mood of a migraine headache, right? Right? That's interpretive work on your end. When I'm painting the lilies, like it's not that
No, this
I'm
this painting
evoking
wouldn't invoke a
serenity,
concept
but
like that.
it's the subject itself that's doing that. It's the artwork itself that's doing that. It's
Right.
doing the
And
brunt work. So
I
that's a
would say
it's
similarly, not to talk over you, sorry.
oh, yeah, you're
I was
I've been
just saying,
talking over you. We've
I
also been
think
going for 2 hours. We've been going
yeah,
for 2 hours also,
yeah,
so we should
yeah.
wrap it up soon.
Yeah, we could probably stop. I think similarly though, this migraine headache painting uh, could give you the visceral experience of what that is like for a subject to undergo without maybe knowing conceptually what it's about. You could you could be brought into that phenomenal world for a moment by looking at this painting. I think that, we can say that there's no conceptual space here, but there is formal arrangement. And these things, when brought to their absolute minimalist, like we looked at the De Stijl painting, you know, we do look for things to grab onto, but we do have things that are left, right? And like, you know, we you need three legs on a stool, right? You could have a four-legged stool, but this three-leg stool is still a stool. And you could say it's stripped down. Certainly this minimalist one is, but I think it is, though non-representational, still evocative of meaning. It still brings to rise certain emotions. The colors, their neatness, the grid, the organization, the sense of style. Fashion is also a non-representational form of art. We could look at um, music, the work of Bach and Mozart. I would grant like lyrics probably representational, but
Mhm.
the vast
We made
majority of
that
just
circle
just
before.
music and harmony, and just like a music piece is, you know, you can think of each of the notes in a musical piece, and you can never find a melody because the melody is between the notes. It is supplied by our reason. Similarly, between the notes, between these images, between the painting and the viewer is the artwork. Um,
Yeah, sure. I guess we can leave it at that. I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
okay. Do you want to like have a closing statement?
I mean, I think I've said everything that really needs to be said. I
All right.
think that for the audience, though, the major point is the implicit definition that my opponent has is going to end up allowing for anything and everything, literally everything in front of you, intentional or not, to be art. And I think that there's a value in conceptualization and categorization. I think it's valuable for both so that we can better understand and then get the sort of interpretive, all these interpretive qualities that my opponent is talking about, right? It's better that in order to reason that, it's better sort of understand that as like a separate category of object and not to conceal sort of the very important nature of other types of art objects, which will, that will sort of hamper our understanding, I believe, of what I call art and what I think should be called art. And the abstract aesthetic objects, beautiful, lovely, great. They might ask questions, right? But they lack, even if you believe in family resemblance, they lack these sort of qualities of other things which are certainly art. And when you start admitting farther and farther relatives away from the family, right, then the concept of art gets diluted and we completely lose the very concept of what art is. And so I think that that's quite important. And so with that, I'll leave it to the audience to vote. Um, yeah, great debate though.
Yeah, really good. I don't know. Yeah, I won't